record button. And just as a reminder, I record the meditations and the talk and not the rest. So to begin, one way I am particularly starting most of my practices now is with some very gentle movement, even if I'm staying in my seat. If you are more comfortable, if you're already finding your body starting to settle and move into a quiet place, no need to do these simple stretches. But if movement is useful for you right now, just start with taking a couple of nice deep in and out breaths. An out breath, you can even let out an audible sigh. No one can hear you, but if that's useful to really release. Give me one more. On the next in breath, if you wish, stretching your arms high, reaching up towards the sky. And on an out breath, releasing, letting go. So the in breath, your own pace is reaching skyward. Out breath, releasing, letting go. Maybe one more. And just letting the arms float down. Noticing wherever it is that they want to rest. Maybe seeing, is there some movement around head and neck? It's useful for you. When we do movement, we're always learning to feel into what feels good, what actually nourishes the body. We often don't know how to hear that, and so we take that as part of the practice. What kind of movement is too much? What kind of movement is not enough? And what kind of movement is beneficial, really helpful? Maybe there's something in the shoulders. And then in your own time, your own pace, letting the body begin to come to stillness. Finishing up whatever movement, taking your time with that. Whatever movement's useful for you. Slowly letting this, in its own time, its own rate, come to a settling. More and more often, I'm also starting my practice with this connection with gravity. So what's it like to allow the awareness to sink in first to the large points of contact, the bottoms of the feet with the floor, really feeling right through the bottoms of the feet. It's very gentle connecting the earth below. Maybe the sits bones, connecting with chair, cushion, bench, wherever you're sitting, floor. Thighs and the legs. A lot of mindfulness is opening up a befriending curiosity to what's here. I'd like to allow space for awareness, these points of contact. Awareness sinking right down through them, rooting into the earth. Letting that awareness expand, knowing that gravity, this gentle holding from the whole of the earth, is actually interacting with every cell of the body. From the top of the head through the entire body. So, what's it like to open into this possibility of release? Releasing down into the earth. Whatever you need to let go of, whatever is ready to be released, allowing it to sink down cell by cell through the whole body, feeling the receptivity of the earth to connect with you. Notice where your hands are resting. Maybe they're on the thigh and there might thighs, and maybe there's some warmth of that connection. Softening the hands. See if you can sense into a natural compassion. Just here in this felt sense of touch. Hands connecting to the thighs. Much as trees root downward in a way that allows them to grow tall. You might begin to notice that this releasing downward actually begins to offer an energy right through a vertical axis of the body. It lifts skyward. Up through the spine, the neck, the head. It's interesting balancing between releasing downward, opens something to grow skyward. You can feel this reaching skyward in our posture. If there's any adjustment that's needed for your posture, take a moment to do that so that you really feel the lengthening of the spine, the opening of the chest, broadening of the shoulders. Nothing straining in this opening. Rather, finding a natural dignity. It's part of our structure. Really opening curiosity into this vertical axis of the body. And shifting the awareness, if you wish, to another point of contact with the whole of life and earth here, every moment. It's in this sea of atmosphere. We breathe and share. Open up a sense of curiosity to where your body meets the air. Analogy is often used about a fish not being able to see the ocean it swims in. We live that way so much of our life. Here's this moment to see it, to feel it, to experience this sea that right through our breath is also part of every cell of our body. Feeling into the breath, moving in and out, contact of life breath with the body. Helps when we intentionally remember that we are part of something larger. Get caught up in a tight, constricted virtual world of our mind. Sometimes lose touch with sacred connection to a larger whole. And physically, our bodies know every moment. When we come to some stillness, we have this possibility of our minds catching up, remembering what our bodies already know. We're part of the sacred wholeness. If it's useful for you, let your awareness expand outward, keeping touch, the breath and the body. As this home base allows the awareness room to explore outward. Maybe it starts just with outward of the space around you, feeling how your body, breath, mind, heart, living, breathing's essence, part of this space right now, wherever you are. And even just stay right here in this exploration of your own being in this space, this living, breathing space where you are. Or you can open it up wider. Maybe to all of those immediately around you. It might be family members, animal members, maybe it's neighbors, maybe it's birds or cicadas. Really feeling into a infinite possibility of life immediately around, the living soil. Feeling your body's breath here from this home base, how you can open outward. And keep exploring if you wish, expanding circles of compassion feeling into a larger and larger sacred wholeness. The neighborhood, the community, maybe everywhere our Zoom circle is expanding to. Letting this be a curiosity, shared life, energy, space, opening of heart and mind. Maybe it's larger, the whole of the city, the county, the state, all of the trees and animals, all of the insects, micro life, all of the people. Take your time with this. Let it stay as small as is useful for you, or continue to let it expand. There's not a right or a wrong with this. It's just exploring the field of the heart. And noticing as we practice, bringing awareness to the possibility already here in our own hearts. Begin to find how the heart is truly boundless. Larger and larger circles becoming possible. Whole of the earth, solar system, the galaxy, the universe, far beyond what our imaginations can even fathom. Still part of that whole. Connected right here, this breath, this body, this heart, this mind. Connected in essence to everything, everywhere. Then how do you allow that knowing, even beyond what we can fathom with our minds, that knowing that we are still a part of it all? How do you begin to allow that sense of this larger, mysterious, unfathomable, sacred wholeness? How do you allow that to begin to inform how you meet your own body, mind, and heart in this moment? Bringing it all the way back to an intimacy with this bit of the universe that was given to you, that is you. How do you open up the field of compassionate, curious awareness? Field of the heart. To meet this body, this bit of life. And sometimes when these invitations are given, we think we should be able to feel a certain way or have a particular experience. we can let all of those false creation stories of what we should be experiencing, we can just let them go. Beginning to bring a willingness to experience what we are experiencing. Allowing it to be as messy, as distracted, as alienated, as cut off in this virtual small mind space that we are often entrapped by. Being willing to bring compassionate willingness to be with ourselves just as we are, breathing in, breathing out. That willingness is the field of the heart, not having a particular kind of experience, but just the willingness to be with this moment and offer it a breath. Start getting specific about what you're noticing. We're really good at noticing what we don't like or what's unpleasant or hard. So challenge yourself. Find something in the body that feels at ease, or at least neutral. Maybe it's the tip of the nose, the ears, the hands resting on the thighs, contact of feet with floor, whatever it is. Make sure in the noise of what's hard, you don't miss what's pleasant. Take your time with this. Use that place, neutral or pleasant, to open up to whatever needs your attention in this body, mind, heart right now. Let yourself feel into a question. What does my body, mind, and heart need in this moment that I can offer? Might be as simple as a breath in and out. Maybe there's some gesture of support, hands on the heart, would be useful. Maybe it's just an internal acknowledgement. Yes, this is being human. And I'm here, awake with care. Taking these closing few minutes of our meditation to meet this body, heart, and mind, whatever way is most useful for you. So last week, I promised that this week we would talk about ways to be with the breath when the breath itself might be triggering. Really felt like I wanted to expand that to ways to be with ourselves in practice when it's just hard to be with our own selves. I heard one person recently describe our world state as a global high intensity activation state, meaning that the baseline of all of our nervous systems triggering is higher in this activated way. There's no surprise with this. I can certainly feel it, and I imagine, assume that most of y'all, that most people have an awareness and a feeling of it at some level or another. And that is why grounding and compassion practices are just so fundamental and important right now. So I want to go back over just basic practices again. We need to hear these over and over, come back to this kind of home starting place of practice again and again. I didn't get as far with it last night as I thought I would, so I probably won't this morning either. So we'll probably have a part 2 next week. To start, considering this question of how do we take care of ourselves well when we are in the midst of high activation? The first step, if you've done this practice for a while, you get the challenge of this. If you haven't, it might sound like, well, duh. The first step is just to wake up to the fact that we are triggered. It's so bizarrely easy to slip into an autopilot mode, which is by definition a level of reactivity in our day, and not even catch that we've done this. I had a perfect example last night when I signed on for the community group last night. I thought I was being mindful. I thought I was preparing for the group. I thought I'd like say, okay, I'm here. I'm doing what I need to do. And I signed on to YouTube and I sat there and there was just me. And there was like no one else. I'm like, I have a group of people on Tuesday. Where are they? Finally, suddenly dawned on me. Oh, they're all over in the Zoom room where I'm supposed to be instead of on YouTube where I think where I actually am. And it was just, it just was clearly, some sort of autopilot that I really wasn't even aware of. That as I thought I was even being mindful, I was just kind of going through the motions, pull up YouTube, and it wasn't even the right place. So it's incredible how sneaky, how stealth that not being awake and aware to what's going on. And sometimes it can be, just kind of like that. It was a sort of benign forgetfulness. And sometimes the autopilot is much harder. And we're still not getting it, that is reactivity as opposed to a truth about the way things are. So an example I want to share for that one was when I very first started my practice years ago, and somebody would say, pay attention to the breath. I couldn't do it much at first without getting hit with waves of claustrophobia or some sort of low degree panic. The autopilot for me was not just this contraction. Somebody would say, pay attention to the breath, and I would go, I'd pay attention to contracting up. The autopilot was not just the contraction, it was the story that went along with the contraction. And the story was, there's just something wrong with me. I either have to push through this and just make this happen, or give up on meditation and admit that I'm a failure at it. Just to be transparent, I hated meditation at first. Can you wonder why? That was where I started, with this sense of this hurts, this doesn't feel good, and I got to push through it because something's wrong with me if I don't, or I'm a failure. And that was my baseline autopilot reactivity for beginning the practice. Fortunately, I had a very wise teacher very early in my practice who one day asked, is anyone having a hard time with the breath? Never dawned on me that other people might have a hard time with the breath too, that there might be some other way of approaching this. Her suggestion to me, which was so useful, was to put my hand on my pulse and feel my heartbeat instead. And so for a long time I meditated like this, and I felt my pulse until I found my way into my breath. And my breath is now really my prime anchor. But without her question, I would not have questioned, I may never have questioned the assumption of the autopilot, that meditation, you either push harder or you fail. And I likely would have given up on meditation, which for me would have been very, very, very sad for my life. So a first step is learning to get clear as that compassionate witness to what's actually present in this moment now. And not just what's happening, but what's the storyline that I'm carrying with what's happening? What element of autopilot, blaming, shaming, judgment is going on along with this challenge? And this is called tracking. Tracking is when we learn to shift away from some story about the moment, either the moment of something's just wrong with me, or the moment of I gotta do, I'm busy, I gotta push, I gotta strive, all of those stories about what we think the moment is. We learn to shift away from that story and instead come to a compassionate willingness to know what's actually present in this well, it happening inside of us in this moment right now. The basic place that we are tracking is a contraction or an opening. It really can all come down to a movement in one or the other of those directions. And we start getting really complex. We might be contracted around our shoulders, but we notice that our feet are really open and soft. So it's not all one or the other, but tracking that basic contraction versus expansion in our bodies is really important. And it's very important to develop a sense of tracking both sides. We so often notice what's wrong, and it's called our negativity bias. It's part of what's wired into our brain. There's nothing wrong with us for doing this. That's the survival instinct. But we have to pay attention to how much easier it is to track what's hard than it is to open the awareness to what's also okay. So we're really looking at both sides. So in the tracking, we start getting used to what are some of our patterns, and that's really helpful. For me, a helpful place to track are my shoulders. Like, am I tensing in my shoulders? If I'm really getting tense, there's this spot right between my eyebrows that starts to tighten up. I used to call it my red hot spot of anger. It was right there. And it's a whole lot better now. So I know that if that's tightening up again, then I really need to take care. Another place that tracking for me is very, very, very useful is tracking my posture. I can't tell you how often during the day, if I catch myself and on sort of autopilot moment, there's a kind of collapse in my posture. And there's something that's very strengthening and useful for me about just coming back to a strong vertical axis that opens up my heart space and allows me to feel that rooting downward, lifting skyward. So tracking posture has for me definitely been very helpful. When we track sensations in the body, we do this at a very specific granular level. And oftentimes we actually have to develop a vocabulary. One of my early teachers used to say we are an emotionally illiterate society. Ooh, yes. I would also say we are a bodily illiterate society. We don't know, we're just so alienated and disconnected from our bodies. We don't even have the vocabulary often to describe what we're meaning in the sensations in the body. So there are actually lists out there that help us get greater literacy with being able to read what's present in the body. One list that I found yesterday that I really liked and probably going to share someplace talked about sensations of dis-ease, unease, such as tightness, clenched, shaky, throbbing, queasy, trembly, burning, radiating, frozen, or blocked, or numb. Learning the words for it actually helps us develop that compassionate witness for what's here. Expansive side, even the lists are always first the negative. The expansive side, maybe words like ease, calm, spaciousness, warmth, coolness, streaming, light, releasing, flow, or fluid. So all of these kinds of descriptions really help us wake up our tracking ability, help bring us back into the movement of aliveness in this body. And I'm just going to say one thing before I go any further. This is hard work. If we're carrying a lot of stuff in our bodies, we're not supposed to do this sitting at home by ourselves. We really need the support of others to help us with this. A good therapist, a friend, a loved one that can really listen. But just notice if there's some assumption of, oh, I just got to figure out how to do this all on my own. I know. The harder it is, the more we are meant to do this in communion with supportive other person. That's what our nervous systems are designed for. And the more we learn this moment by moment with ourselves, the more useful those other supports can become for us. Another place that tracking is very useful is in our voice. I may not be getting that I'm stressed in a conversation, but suddenly I can get my voice, my tone, all of that. Suddenly I can get that I'm kind of leaned in, I'm a little hunched, my voice is a little pressured, there's kind of a tone, a charge, my pitch tends to go a little bit higher when I'm stressed. And I kind of like get this thing going on. And it's really helpful to understand that's what I do when I'm stressed with speech. And that helps me reground, recenter, to be with myself and the other, whoever it is, back in a way that I want to be, regrounded with that. The word tracking is typically used for body sensations. I actually like to think of it also with tracking my thoughts. I really like this term of tracking. It helps me take that step back, that compassion. And compassion is hand in hand always with tracking. We're never tracking from a neutral, dispassionate place. We're always tracking from a place of heart care. So this word tracking kind of helps me develop that compassionate witness that can watch the flow of my own thinking. I can track tension in my thought patterns and start to notice how there's some very familiar old habit rut thought patterns fall into again and again. One pattern might be a sort of pressurized whirlpool that sort of endlessly is repeating itself over and over. Or I might track either really loud shaming or blaming judgment voices. I tend not to have the really loud ones as much anymore, but it's amazing. There's still all these subtle layers that tracking helps me uncover and find. Beating up on ourselves never brings us into good alignment with heart space. We often do it because we think that's what's going to make us better. But if we think from the place of the heart, that best friend that's really useful is they may say strong words to us, but they are saying that from goodwill, compassion, and heart. Not from you are bad, you are wrong, you're just a failure, you're all of those things. So notice how in the same way that strong, good friend that absolutely believes in you makes you stronger, we need to learn how to be that for ourselves. Tracking what kind of thought patterns we tend to fall into is very useful for this. Then the last thing I want to say, I've said this already, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Typically, what we track first are the unpleasant. Typically, what's foremost on our mind is what we don't like, what doesn't feel good, what's challenging, what's hard. And all of that can be that at a sort of consuming level. So we need to be skillful, intentional, strong-hearted in our willingness to track the good, to track what's useful, to track what's helpful, to track when we're getting caught in a small, tight story that needs some opening and expansion, you know, to see that the tree and the life of the tree and the life of this body actually share an interbeing, and like to remember that larger view of wholeness. We need to track it right in our bodies. It's been so useful for me to notice when I get caught in an anxiety storm, it tends to be right here in my heart space. And in being curious about this and following this, I have never yet felt that storm extend all the way to my toes. My toes are so far have always been free of it. They're just living like a tree. You know, the tree has this essence of life. My toes have this natural essence of life. Where might that be for you? Maybe it's the bottoms of the feet. I know a lot of people, the tip of the nose tends to be a sort of neutral or even maybe pleasant spot. We need to know where these havens are in our body and then strengthen them so that we can use them as support for ourselves when some storm is wanting to knock us off our feet. So I'm gonna stop there, and next week we'll continue this and really look at a lot more the role of compassion and specific grounding practices. I had one person last night, you know, some of the specific ones are the same old ones, but they are so useful. Someone shared last night how helpful for her 4-7-8 breathing was in the midst of a difficulty she was experiencing yesterday. So for this week, I really encourage you to get curious about strengthening that instrument of tracking with compassionate curiosity and care in your body. And maybe what's one simple grounding practice that when you track, then you can practice with it. 4-7-8 breathing, feeling the feet on the floor, 3 deep breaths, whatever it is that's useful for you. So let's pause right now and just take a moment to sit. I invite you to track what's going on in your own body, mind, and heart in this moment without judgment. Or if there is judgment, can you track that too without judgment? If there was something that you heard this morning that was useful for you, let yourself know that. And set some sort of intention to how you strengthen and practice with that for you. Whatever was not useful, how do you just let it go? Thank you.
Thank you.